Hi, I'm Jennifer Kuhn with the Legislative Analyst Office, and this morning our office released a report that highlights the major findings of a survey we conducted on school district finance and flexibility. Last fall, we distributed this survey to every superintendent of a public school district in California. And the survey was intended to seek information about how school districts were responding to recent state and federal developments. Last year, two very significant developments took place. One, at the state level, the state removed strings associated with many K-12 categorical programs. Specifically, the state allowed districts to shift funds among as well as away from roughly 40 state-funded categorical programs. And two, at virtually the same time, the federal government provided California with more than $6 billion in one-time federal stimulus funding for K-12 education. So our survey was intended to help the legislature gather information on how school districts were responding to these state and federal developments. So in the next few minutes, I wanted to share with you three of our major survey findings and then talk a little bit about how you might use our survey findings. So starting with our survey findings, one of our major survey findings was that school districts were finding that categorical flexibility was making it easier to make local decisions. So for example, almost 90% of the districts that responded to our survey said that categorical flexibility was making it easier for them to develop and balance their budgets. Similarly, about 3/4 of districts reported that categorical flexibility was making it easier for them to dedicate resources to local priorities as well as make staffing decisions. The second major finding from our survey was that districts were relying heavily on categorical flexibility. So most districts reported that they did shift away funds from most flexed categorical programs. In particular, districts reported that they shifted funds away from programs that didn't support direct K-12 classroom instruction. So for example, about 2/3 of districts reported shifting funds away from adult education, from maintenance of school facilities, from professional development and counseling. School districts also reported shifting funds away from programs that might be considered enrichment or supplemental student support. For example, 2/3 of districts reported shifting funds away from art and music programs, programs for advanced students, and summer school programs. Very few districts reported shifting funds into flexed categorical programs. This suggests that districts were primarily redirecting categorical funds into core classroom instruction. The third major survey finding was that many districts wanted much more flexibility for categorical programs that remained standalone programs. For example, more than half of the districts reported that they wanted much more flexibility in implementing the K-3 class size reduction program, home to school program, after school program, and programs for English learners and low-income students. So turning then to how one might use our survey findings. By tracking and assessing how school districts were responding to recent developments, our survey was intended to help the legislature in thinking about its decisions for 2010-11. So our report lays out a package of recommendations that the legislature could adopt in 2010-11 that would result in school districts having more flexibility. So in the next minute, I wanted to highlight just three of our recommendations. One of our recommendations is that the state would make 3 existing standalone categorical programs flexible. Specifically, we recommend that the state would make the K-3 class size reduction, the home to school transportation, and the after school programs flexible. This means that districts would be able to use associated funds either for existing program activities or they could redirect those funds and use them for other local education priorities. Our second recommendation is that the state would take 2 other standalone programs and merge them. Specifically, we recommend the legislature take a relatively small English learner program and merge it with a much bigger, much broader program called Economic Impact Aid that also serves English learners and low-income students. And thirdly, we recommend that the state take 5 career technical education programs and consolidate them. We also recommend the state then remove most of the existing associated CTE program requirements and replace them with the requirement that high schools provide the state with a relatively small amount of student-oriented CTE performance-based measures. So overall, our package of recommendations is intended to provide the legislature with additional ideas for providing school districts flexibility so that they can weather the recession while at the same time streamlining the K-12's relatively complex system of categorical funding. So we have much more detail on our recommendations in our report, but we hope you found these highlights helpful. Thank you for listening.